The Man of Steel gets a new figure release as we have a look at the DC Collectibles DC Essentials figure number 5, Superman. DC Essentials is a line of 7-inch action figures based on DC characters with universal appeal, accessible to both longtime collectors and those just starting out, which deliver authentic detail from a company with 2 decades experience creating high-quality action figures. Now, before we delve deeper into this figure review, let's first figure out how tall Superman stands. Putting it right to the top of his head. Yeah, to no surprise, the figure stands exactly 7 inches in height. If you are somebody that measures your figures in centimeters, then let me tell you that the figure stands at 17.9 centimeters in height. And to also show you how Superman stacks up against one of the previously looked at DC Essentials figures, here he is next to the Caped Crusader Batman. I would say it's safe to say that they're about the same height. Superman maybe stands just a little bit taller. No, it definitely seems like they're the same height. A nice contrast of colors, though. You've got the darker grays, the moodier purples and blues, compared to the more vibrant colors of the yellows, the reds, and of course the very bright blue on Superman's majority of his costume here. Moving Superman back into the center of the frame of the camera here. Sadly, he doesn't come with any accessories. I kind of hoped he could have come with something. A shard of kryptonite, a few extra interchangeable hands, but sadly though, for this being an Essentials line, Superman kind of gets bare bones when it comes to something. Now, granted, when we had a look at Batman only really came with a Batarang. I don't know why they have to shortchange us, if you will, when it comes to these new figure lines. I mean, if this is kind of the upper echelon of Superman figures and DC characters, at the very least, could they have given them not then display bases? Even though technically none of the figures so far have come with holes on the undersides of their feet, or at the very least, come with some extra accessories. No, Superman sadly only comes with exactly what you're currently looking at, and what you're currently looking at is not a bad-looking Superman. I have been told in the past that I'm an awfully bit of a harsh critic when it comes to figure reviews or figures of Superman. I guess it might be just because Superman is like one of my all-time favorite superheroes that I do get a little more critical when I think looking at those figure releases of that guy, say versus the likes of a Martian Manhunter or say the likes of a Blue Beetle. You know, some of those characters really don't resonate as much to me when it comes to, plastic figures as it does Superman. So I do find myself, yes, being a little bit more overly critical than when it comes to any releases of Superman. So when I say this, hopefully take this with, a good strong grain of salt. Like I hopefully have some weighted opinion when it comes to Superman. I do really like the face sculpt. He's slightly a little bit on a dirtier flesh tone. If we compare it, say, to the likes, and I just finished recently having him in camera, Batman's is about the same sort of problem. They kind of give him this slightly darker, paler skin. It kind of looks as if it's more paint than it is plastic. I don't know what the original coloring was on Superman's face, but it definitely doesn't seem like it was this color. You can even see, and the more reasonings why I'm saying this, is you can see that there's all these little spots. Let me just bring the camera in a little bit here. There's all these little imperfections on the side of Superman's face, around the cheek, around the lower area of his jaw. It's really hard not to see it. Also, I've got a little bit of I don't know if it's paint flaking, but there's something that's chipping off the side of Superman's face, which is a bit sad to say. Also, I do think that this has a really strong side profile for Superman, which then brings my attention to the one problem, the biggest problem I have with this figure. It's his neck. His neck is way too thin. Now, if you look at the excess amount of extra chin that he's got further forward, his neck should be a lot broader. Like, it should stick out. I mean, this is Superman after all. He should really have a thicker neck. It almost looks as if you've taken a Superman head and plunked it on top of a neck that really isn't his size. The neck also should be, in my own opinion at least, the neck should be at the very least as wide as his head. I mean, he's a muscular superhero. Unfortunately, he just has a really thin neck that at times when you're looking at from certain angles, it does look a little on the malnourished side, I have to admit. The rest of his body is actually quite good as well. I like his face, and I like the body that they've given Superman here. Traditional colors, right down to the fact that he's got red trunks. I was told not to say underoos, but I would have said underoos. He's got red underoos, and then, like I said, the rest of his body is blue. They went the choice of giving him rather low-riding pants, so low-riding trunks, though. It's an odd choice because it reads almost a little bit more like short shorts than it does trunks. I probably would have just kept the coloring like this for all the red, and then kept the majority of the legs then blue, or I would have brought them up just a little bit, that it was maybe like this. I don't know if I would give him this broad of a trunk. It does kind of make him look like he's wearing rather short shorts rather than the traditional Superman trunks. And then even on top of that, the paint added over top of the blue, the red could be maybe just an extra coat added on top of that. You can see a little bit of the blue underneath, somewhat bleeding through. The boots are nice. They're slightly more shinier than the otherwise more matte color of the figure here. I still have a problem, unfortunately, when it comes to these figures. The legs, I find the feet are really excessively loose. Sometimes this can be a problematic feat because these feet cause the figure then to topple over a little bit more than one would definitely want. Display stands, again, would be very crucial, but then your biggest problem, no pegs. There's no peg holes on the undersides of the feet. Spin the figure around. Nice looking cape. Interesting cape, because the cape isn't wide, but the way it looks as if it was a wider cape that has folded in on itself. This is the regular cape, and then these look like the sides of the cape that have been covered over. And yet here are the edges of the cape, so I'm not quite sure why it flows the way it does. It almost lends itself to a wider cape that has been folded in on itself, but that's really not the case. I do like that it's narrow. Wish that it could have had a Superman emblem on it, yes, but I do like that it's a narrow cape at the very least, that it doesn't look like it takes up a whole lot of the figure. It doesn't compete with the plastic, the body of the front of the figure. Paint's pretty good on this guy. I don't really have any big concerning issues with the paint. I don't know why this section here couldn't have been painted in yellow, because you can see it from the front that it almost makes the belt look like it's further down than what it actually is, this little extra bit of red. I may probably go in there and just kind of paint that in with a little bit of yellow. I don't want to mess up the figure, but it does stand out a little bit that you've got that little extra red happening there. Proportionally, his body works. He's a very narrow, torsoed character, but an overly muscular Superman. My biggest strike really could be that he needs just a big, broader neck. The head sculpt is really good, and that's the crucial point. It's a little, again, chippy here and there, but the broader neck really would have finished up this figure rather nicely. Talking a little bit about his hands, one is a closed fist. For some strange reason, they've opted just to give him the flight hands, or at least one flight hand. I mean, this looks good if you want to display Superman flying. If you don't, though, it does seem a little odd and out of place that one fist is closed and then the other fist is wide open. Unless, again, he was holding something, or if you want to just have him in more of a stoic pose, you could kind of have him like this. Speaking of posability, let's go ahead and run through that together. His head rotates all the way around, even though he's got a really thin neck. Head hinges up and down. It hinges to about there, and it hinges down about there. He has an upper torso crunch, which is really stiff on this figure. There we go. And he also has the waist swivel. Again, it's just such a sore thumb standing out. You see that little bit of red peeking its way through. Arms hinge out, and you can also rotate them all the way around. He has a swivel on the bicep, not only a single hinge, but a double hinge on the elbow, so you can do the Superman upper elbow uppercut. And then you can rotate the hands, and you can bend them back and forth. That works the same on this side as well. Just a standard ball joint on the legs, meaning that the legs can split out to about there, and then you can move them back and forth. He has a top swivel cut on the thigh, about 3/4 cut, 3/4 of the way up the thigh cut. Double hinge on the knee. He has a swivel on the boots, and he has one of those swivels where the hinge, let me show you, works this way. But if you want to hinge the feet this way, you have to rotate the feet, or rotate the peg, and then rotate the foot back to give you that whatever hinge that you want to work with. If not, you have to then rotate the foot the same direction that you want to turn it, and it bends that way, if that makes any sense. It's got an ankle pivot as well. Like I said, a big problem that I have so far with, now I've only looked at 3 of the figures. That's going to change soon because we're going to have a look at more of them on this channel. But standing, I find getting these figures to stand sometimes can be a bit of a tricky feat. Like I said, because of he's got rather loose feet, like at least foot portions. I would have pegged the feet, I think, a little bit differently than what they did. I probably would have just given them an outright ball joint. I'm not sure really why they gave him just one of those old swivel hinges. But overall, I'm liking the figure. I know it sounds like I was overly critical over the course of this review, but I generally do like the figure. There's only a few little things here and there that I would change to an otherwise quite nice looking Superman. At times, I know I can be overly critical when it comes to certain figures. Why are you dissecting things as much as you are instead of just appreciating the fact that they gave a figure release of said character? Superman, I think I hold in high regard. He's always been one of my favorite superheroes growing up. In fact, ever since I was 5 years old, Superman has been my favorite superhero. And simply adding to that list later on in life was Batman and Spider-Man, but Superman has always had a soft spot in my heart. Maybe for that reason and that reasoning alone, I always want to find the best Superman out there. And small little things that can drive people not crazy are things that I do notice on specific figures. Case in point is this Superman here, which has the workings of being a great, outstanding release of the Man of Steel. There's only a few things that I wish could have been slightly changed. The chipping on the side of his face clearly shows that paint has been applied over top of existing plastic. I wish it was a little bit smoother, but I know QC can vary from figure to figure. Your figure may be fine, my figure may have bad chipping on the side of face. It goes with the nature of picking out figures when you go to certain stores. You know, look at them when you physically have them before you buy them. Just make sure that the paint is clean, that nothing is off, that the QC on the figures are generally pretty good, so that's something you can easily overlook. The only strike I could really make about this figure, other than loose ankles, which seems to be a problem that I've experienced so far with only 2 figures into this line. Loose ankles seem to be an ongoing problem, and I hope that they can fix it. I may have to tighten Superman's ankles just so he can support his weight a little bit better than what he is. The only real nitpick I can make about this figure is I wish that he did have a broader neck. It works good on some angles. In other angles, when you're looking at him solely from the side, you do notice that his neck isn't as thick as it could be. And of course, transitioning the very nice head sculpt to the sculpt of his body, something like a thin neck can stand out like a sore thumb. And at least for me and perhaps me alone, I do find the neck could have been a little bit broader on Superman. As good as the head sculpt could be, a little narrow neck could be a deal breaker. Luckily it isn't, but it could be a deal breaker for making a figure like 100% perfect. This figure isn't 100% perfect, but it's pretty good when it comes to a Superman release. And again, that's coming from somebody who I will admit, I have been overly critical at times when it comes to reviewing Superman figures. That's just my passion. Either way, though, if you guys are interested in picking this one up for yourself, DC Essentials Superman should be now on store shelves in comic book stores. If you are interested in picking this one up for yourself, you should be able to find it right there. Today we were having a look at the DC Collectibles DC Essentials. I believe this was figure 5, and this was Superman. Like I said, we're only 2 figures into the line, or at the very least on this channel, we're only 2 figures into this line. Superman now marking the 3rd. But don't worry, we're going to have a look at the rest of the figures in upcoming videos, so certainly stay tuned for that. If you guys haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, what are you waiting for? Like I said, we're going to have a look at the DC Essentials Superman that's going to be coming up. We're going to have a look at a whole bunch of other figures. I know what they are. You probably don't know what they are. It just means you'll have to stay tuned and make sure that you got your eyes peeled to this channel. Don't literally have your eyes peeled. I still think that's a really gross phrase. Either way, guys, as always, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.